Beeghly and Company Jewelers, and I have Dan, one of our very accomplished jewelers here. We're going to talk with you today a little bit about basic chain repair, one of the many services that we offer. So what I've got, Dan, is a bracelet. It's broken in two places, one near the clasp and one in the middle of the chain. Dan, how would you go about repairing this for one of our customers?
Well, when this comes in, the first thing that we would do is look it over and try to find a carriage stamp or some marking that would indicate what the metal is that we're working with. If there's not a clearly visible one, we might have to run a quick acid test or something like that to figure out the metal, and I can tell that this one is sterling silver. It's important because we want to use the correct materials when we're doing our repair so that when we're done, you cannot see a single thing. It's going to blend right in. So
would you handle both of these repairs the same way, the one near the clasp and the one that's in the middle of the chain?
Actually, for this particular case, I wouldn't. This first weld, the one in the middle of the chain, I would be perfectly comfortable using the torch to solder this back together. Silver solder is a little bit different than anything that that customers might be familiar with, because unlike electrical solder or plumbing solder, silver solder is 92.5% silver. It is just like the bracelet. Okay. Its alloy is slightly different than the alloy used in the bracelet, just to lower the melting point a little bit, so when we heat it up with the torch, the solder melts first and not your bracelet. We don't want your link melting, we don't want the links fusing together and creating a stiff point. So we are going to use this silver solder to act as the glue that is holding that link together, but it is still sterling silver.
Okay, and what's different about the clasp then? Why would you not weld it the same way?
So the clasp is a lobster. It has a spring on the inside. The spring is spring steel, and spring steel is tempered to give it that spring. That's a heat temper. If you use a torch with a heat tempered spring, you're liable to take out that temper, and the clasp is going to become limp and it's not going to work. It's going to fall off your wrist.
So we'd end up having to replace the clasp because we heated it up, is that what you're saying?
Right, and then it would be a more expensive repair, and we want to save the customer as much money as possible.
Sure.
So the first thing we're going to do, though, is the one in the middle, the torch weld in the middle of the chain.
Okay, well, why don't you show us what you do, Dan?
Block here. I'm going to add a tiny amount of flux to my joint so that as I heat it up, it stays clean. Light my torch. Pick up my solder. Just that easy. I have my solder joint. Flipping it over just to make sure my seam is complete, and it is. So for the laser welder, we are welding the jump ring next to the clasp. I want to do the same thing where I bend the link and get my seam nice and tight and clean first, and then I am going to get my weld joint right in the middle of crosshairs and step on a foot pedal, which activates the laser, and I can hear a slight little tick with each shot. I'm working my way around that seam so that I can see that it is complete. And I have completed it. It's that simple. So now that my links are back together, I'm going to run a rubber wheel and maybe a brush wheel over the links to polish them so that you won't be able to see where I did my work. Now that my solder seam and my weld joint have both been polished, I'm going to quickly run it through the ultrasonic cleaner and steam it off, and then the job will be complete, at least as far as the shop is concerned. There you go, Allie.
All right, Dan, thank you.
You're welcome.
Now we'll just do a quality control check of the work that he did and give our customer a call and let him know it's finished.